Hi everyone, you're watching the Virtual Amicus and I'm Jay Lodha. So today we have a special question and answer session on Supreme Court Advocates on Record Examination. So joining us today for this very special segment is a very special counsel. She obviously needs no formal introduction, but the tradition or the format of our show is such that we introduce our guests and amicus. So we have with us, joining us from Delhi, we have Dr. Charu Mathur, and she's an advocate on record at the Honorable Supreme Court of India. And just to give you all a brief introduction about our amicus for today's session, Dr. Charu Mathur has rich and diverse expertise in corporate, commercial, civil, criminal, and constitutional matters. She's an advocate on record at the Supreme Court of India. Dr. Mathur is a regular practitioner before the Honorable Supreme Court and has represented various parties like cricketing bodies, educational institutions like IIT Jodhpur, NLE Jodhpur, BPUT Odisha, Maharana Pratap Agriculture University, Gujarat University, Jodhpur University, private engineering and medical colleges of Gujarat, Rajasthan, and Odisha. She's also counsel for various high courts, PSUs like NFL, GIDC, state instrumentalists like RSRTC, and leading private groups like Texmeco. She's also on the panel of energy companies of Jodhpur, Jaipur, and Ajmer. She also caters to advisory and consultation assignments. She reviews, drafts, vets complex commercial agreements. She's done a lot of international JVs, joint ventures in educational sector. She is probably the only person to develop a course on essentials as well as on practical aspects of insolvency and bankruptcy code. She's a frequent speaker at various forums. Dr. Charu is a rare combination not only in litigation but also advisory work and also academics. She designed course curriculum for various programs of various institutions. Her expertise in the academic field lies in providing structured programs for legal aspects of the business to management institutions. She has developed key content on GST, insolvency and bankruptcy code, and she's also a registered GST practitioner. She regularly conducts sessions on legal aspects on business at Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, IIFT. She's a published author with a book on company law 2013. And keeping in line with her academic interest, she is the content curator and manager at EBC Learning, an e-learning initiative of the Eastern Book Company, the leading publishers of law books and SEC journals. She's also on board of advisors of various journals, and she has conducted a lot of training in professional ethics for insolvency professionals. And further, she has been in practice since 2000, AOR since 2007, and she's also represented the Nizam of Hyderabad and other royal families like Bharatpur, Udaipur, and does a lot of JV, M&A advisory work as well, and has also experience as an editorial advisor to a lot of forums. So wow, that was some introduction. So thank you, Ms. Mathur, for taking out time. And I'm sorry I'm ruining your Saturday for this session on the Advocate on Record Supreme Court examination. Any introductory remarks before we start with our session, ma'am?
Thank you, Jay. Thank you so much for having me. It is a pleasure to get connected with you and to speak. I have been following the Virtual Amicus for some time now. I'm really impressed by the way you are conducting these sessions. They are very enriching. And the people that you are calling, it is always a pleasure to learn. Last I watched was Umang Gupta. That was so informative, and all the queries that you asked. I'm really impressed by the way you are conducting the show.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Coming from you, it really means a lot. And so let's quickly start with our segment. If you're ready, ma'am, we can start immediately.
Yeah.
All right. So, ma'am, the question number one. So if you could give us a brief introduction to all the viewers who are watching on what exactly is the Advocate on Record examination all about, from not only its inception, but also a brief history surrounding the same.
Right. So Jay, as you all know, Government of India Act 1935 came, and before that there was Government of India Act 1919. So you all must have heard about Dr. Hari Shankar Gaur from Sagar in MP. So he was the one who actually first mooted this idea of having a Supreme Court, right? The highest apex court for India, for Indians. Now the trigger point for that was trial of Bhagat Singh, right? So we all know that he was treated very unfairly, and at that point of a time, if there has to be any appeal, it had to go to Privy Council. and it was not affordable for everybody from India to go and file appeal there. So virtually your doors were shut. Now, when they mooted it at that point of a time, there was not much clarity what they wanted, but they wanted one particular code which will be there, which will be the apex code, right? And if you read the various documents, you will find that there was a lot of debate between Dr. Harishankar God, Dr. Tej Bahadur Sapru, and Motilal Nehru about establishment of Supreme Court. So finally, after a lot of ifs and buts, finally, though it was mooted in 1921 or 23, finally materialized as a federal court in 1937. Somewhere in October 1937, federal court was established. That was the highest court of India before independence, and it had a short existence of till the Supreme Court came into being. There was a federal court with 7 judges and all. So at that time, there were the pleaders who were doing filing before the federal court, because the idea was that you have to have people who are accountable for whatever is practiced in these courts, because they were the highest courts. So at that point of a time, there were advocates and agents. So at that point of a time, advocates on records were called agents. So when Constituent Assembly started drafting, when the Constitution of India came into being on 26 January 1950, and Supreme Court was inaugurated on 28 January 1950. It was in the in the Chamber of Princes. This inauguration ceremony was held with 7 judges. But at that point of a time, there were no rules how the lawyers will be governed in this country. So to make a seamless transition for a young country, they adopted Supreme Court Rules 1950 were framed, which were essentially how the federal courts were taken. And still, I can't hear you.
No, ma'am, please go ahead. Yeah.
So in that point of a time when, so for the seamless transaction, Supreme Court Rules 1950 were formulated, and still there were counsels and the agents. So even in the Bombay High Court, you will still find I/B, which is instructed by. So if you pick out old Supreme Court judgments, then again you will find these things, that this person is, this lawyer is arguing on behalf of, and the client, the person who has filed that matter is the agent of the client, right? So this practice went on and on. It was only when we had our Chief Justice Gajendra Gatkar, I think he was the 7th Chief Justice. So in 1964, he mooted the idea that we should have our own rules. Now by 1964, you had Advocates Act 1961, right? So they said that we should have some rules which will govern how the Supreme Court will function on the judicial side as well as on the administrative side. We need to have to formalize the rules, because till 1950 to 1966, we are still being governed by Supreme Court Rules 1950. So Gajendra Gatkar, he was the first person who mooted this idea that we should have a Supreme Court rules. Now, if you look from where do we get this power that Supreme Court could make its own rules? So when you look at the Advocates Act 1961, you will find the savings clause. In the savings clause, it is section 52, which says that it can form its own rules, and under Article 145 of the Constitution, for the functioning of the court, Supreme Court formulated Supreme Court Rules 1966. Under Supreme Court Rules 1966, you have Order 4, which deals with the advocates. Under this, there are various rules, and in the Rule 1B, it says that there will be a class of advocates known as advocates on records who have the right to file as well as plead before the Supreme Court. So anybody can go and plead before the Supreme Court, but for filing, either you have to be petitioner in person or you have to file it through advocate on record. Now the question arises, why do you need an advocate on record for Supreme Court? Like if I go to any high court, most of the high courts, I can just go and file by wakalatnama and I can argue my matter. So the rationale you find is that it is the apex court. You get matters from all over the country, right? And they need somebody who is accountable. Mostly, like even to serve to the opposite side, to file the reply. So you need somebody who is then and there, right? So even though if you look at the rules, there are stringent conditions that your office should be within a 16-kilometer radius of the Supreme Court premises. You should have a registered clerk. So all those things are there. Now the apex body or the Association for Supreme Court Advocates on Record Association, it had still not come into being, though the rules were framed in 1966. So SCORA, as we call it, it came into being only in 1985. Now when Supreme Court, they started with this examination and all, so these examinations were really tough. So in the initial days, the pass percentage was barely 1% or 2%. Only in last 3 or 4 years that they have started making 200 plus lawyers as advocates on record. So even if you look today, there are less than 3,500 lawyers who have been designated as AORs. In the 70 years of journey, you have got around 3,500 or so. And in the last 5-6 years, you have found around 1,000 more lawyers coming into this picture. So that is all about advocates on record. So essentially for compliance and somebody who can be held responsible to the Supreme Court, you need advocates on record. So I think this answers your first question.
Of course, ma'am. It definitely brings a lot of clarity as to the inception, its history, why it came into being, and how important is the role and position of an AOR before the Honorable Supreme Court. So, ma'am, moving on, next question. What is the role or the job of an advocate on record at the Honorable Supreme Court of India? And how different is the role in comparison to a regular legal practitioner before the Honorable Supreme Court of India?
Right. So, advocate on record, it is one who is officer of the court like any other lawyer, but he is more responsible for compliance purposes of the Supreme Court. Right. So as far as the AOR is concerned, he is to comply with all the procedure. See, whenever a SLP or a writ is filed in Supreme Court, it goes under the certificate of an AOR that they have complied. Likewise, there is no material fact that they have hidden. There is not something which was argued before that has been put forward. So these are all the compliances that goes within in the SLP or within in the civil appeal or writ jurisdiction, whichever jurisdiction of Supreme Court you are there. So there is an added responsibility for the AOR to comply with. Now coming on to the role of AOR, AOR can file and it can be drawn by somebody else also. Though usually the practice that I have seen is mostly we are the ones who usually draw it also as an AOR, but there are several other people who would like to have contributed, so their name also come in the drawn list. Now said that there is a name landing practice in the Supreme Court also. There are specialized lawyers who just charge for putting their signatures without getting anything done, not even getting it filed before the registry. So that is one aspect that that has been chided by the Supreme Court also in a famous judgment by Justice B.S. Chauhan. He said that this practice must go. There have been challenges to AOR. Why AOR is there? Why do you need to create a special category of lawyers? So there is a judgment by Delhi High Court where which have upheld the validity of AORs. They realize that as an apex court, they require advocates on record, saying that there are high courts like Patna and all where they still have AOR are required there. So, and if you come to how they are different from the other lawyers, so they are the ones who can file as well as plead, right? And for that to become an AOR, as we will be talking further, there is a certain more qualifications which are required. As a lawyer, you pass out from a law school today and you can go and argue before Supreme Court tomorrow, right? But as an AOR, you have to wait for a 5 year to file before the Supreme Court.
And to add to that, don't you think that we need a similar kind of system before Honorable Rajasthan High Court as well? Or do you think that it is only required before the apex court?
I think accountability has to be there at every step, right? With this virtual hearing, which I think will become a norm, and it has become very convenient for anybody to just sit and file anywhere with e-filing and argue anywhere, right? It has actually opened many forums for us. So for court to require somebody to compliance, they should have advocates on record for this. Saying that the e-filing per se is such a thing that you are not required at that physical location. So there are people who are saying that you should do away with the AOR itself. So it is whichever way a person wants to interpret, they can go for.
Moving on, ma'am. Next question. What is the basic eligibility criteria for appearing, writing, or taking the AOR examination? Who is eligible to write the AOR examination, and what is the criteria?
Right. So criteria has changed over the years. Earlier it was you need to have, after enrolling with the Bar Council, you need to have 7 years of experience. Then you could write your AOR exams. Now that has been reduced to 5 years. So it is 4+1. So you should be enrolled with the Bar Council for 4 years. Then after that, you need to enroll with an advocate on record with 10 years of standing. And you have to undergo a training under that person for 1 year. So you will get one certificate. He will issue a letter saying that such and such person has started rather you give yourself to this board of examination at Supreme Court. This is something you have to go and do physically. There is a lot of demand that these forms should be allowed to submit virtually, right? You have to physically go and give it before the controller of examination in Supreme Court for that you are commencing this practice under such and such lawyer. You have to submit a draft and then you start a practice. So once this is known as commencement of training. Right, and once you complete it, AOR will give you a certificate that such person has worked with him or her for 1 year, and after that a certificate of completion of training is issued, and thereafter you are eligible to write this exam of AOR. So this is the qualification that you require to have before, and this is the one-time qualification. Suppose a person is not able to clear the exam for the first time, he need not go for the training for the next time. This is a one-time exercise of training.
Ma'am, any limit to the number of attempts that a person can take?
No, to the best of my knowledge, because no, but I know there are people who have attempted, who have become AORs in 3rd or 4th attempt.
Yeah.
And when you come to the marking schemes and also that also we will be elaborating as we come to that.
Yeah. Ma'am, if you could elaborate on the structure of the examination, as in how many papers a lawyer is required to write, what all subjects are covered, and what exactly is the examination pattern like?
Right. So there are 4 papers which you are supposed to write. One is practice and procedure. Second is drafting. Third is professional ethics and advocacy. And finally it is leading cases. Earlier we used to have accounts paper also in the professional ethics paper, but now it has been done away. So when I wrote my paper way back in 2007, at that point of a time, accounts was also one of the paper, but now it is not a paper anymore. Now coming on to how to prepare and how to write these exams, there is a syllabus. You can find past year's paper on the Supreme Court website itself, and they are very helpful. Coming on to the scheme of the examination, it again varies from exam year to year, right? Because these papers are evaluated by the senior advocates, right? It is not anybody else. They are the one who set the papers. They are the one who correct these papers, evaluate these papers. So there are some years where you will find MCQs also there. There are some years you will find very long paper are there, and you have to write in 3 hours that paper. So it will vary from year to year, but there are, yes, certainly some questions which are compulsory in each paper, but you do get lots of choices. Now coming on to the first paper of practice and procedure, if you are a regular practitioner at Supreme Court and you have been actually working, you are going to registry, you are filing, you are observing court. So this paper should not be difficult to you at all. You need to understand all the jurisdictions of the Supreme Court, whether it is ordinary jurisdiction, original jurisdiction, whether it is appellate jurisdiction, whether it is extraordinary jurisdiction, whether it is advisory jurisdiction. All these jurisdiction you should know. So if you have been working in some chamber for 4 years, you would have actually come across all these cases. You would have learned about transfer petition, what to file, how to file. Said that if you go on the Supreme Court's website itself, you will find at the bottom of page something written as practice and procedure. If you go through that handbook there, that will itself be very helpful for you to understand, and it is the sufficient thing. So the advised book for this is Practice and Procedure by B.R. Agarwala, which has been revised by Raju Ramchandran sir. So that is the standard book which you need to follow. Second paper is drafting. So you need to hear the scenario is given to you. Usually you are asked to draft one writ. Under Article 32, you are asked to file one transfer petition you have to write. You have to make certain applications. So then they give you scenario-based problems, right? So, I think in my time I had got one problem which was relating to, I think, some political disturbances which were going. And you want to file a writ petition against that. How you will file, what will be your prayer. So the question, it is very important that you read the question completely and read what they are asked to write, because you have got only 3 hours to write 5 questions in drafting, right? So sometimes they just ask you to write the grounds. Sometimes they ask you to just write the prayer. Sometimes they ask you to just write the this thing application only. Sometimes they ask you to draft the synopsis of this thing. So you should pay attention what is being asked. Sometimes they ask you to identify who all you will make the parties, right? So whatever is given, you have to actually apply what it is being asked, because many a time students just in this thing that I have got 3 hours only, they get confused and they start writing entire thing right from the synopsis to list of date and then filing the actual petition. So with that, coming on to the third paper, which is professional ethics and advocacy, again on the Supreme Court website itself, you will find the reading material. Reading material are some papers that they have put on the website, and there is some lectures by the senior advocate Venkata Ramani sir, so that you can take it from there. More it required. When I wrote my paper, there was another book on professional ethics, I think by Alagiri or somebody. That was old book. I remember I could not get the book, but I had a photocopy of that, which we got from the library itself. Now coming on to the last paper and the most dreaded paper is of leading cases. So this year they have revised the list, and now I think there are around 70 leading cases which are there. So when I wrote there were 51, so now there are almost touching 70. Now people get very scared of these cases, how to read 70 and retain them. Here you need to take a deep breath, think very coolly, because you will get one book, which is the photocopy of the head notes of Supreme Court reports, SCR, right? And it gives you head notes of all the 70 cases. If you are active practitioners or if you have been a diligent student, these cases you must have heard. At least the first 30 cases you would have heard or you would have read about them. Said that there are various cases which are very exhaustive, very lengthy, like Keshwanand Bharati is of course there. You have I.R. Kaulo is there. And even in Read Delhi Laws, the earliest judgment, which is very difficult to understand even for a very seasoned practitioner. So you need to get the hold of that head notes wala book which they give you, and then you apply it. Even when this head notes book is given to you, still many people flunk in leading cases. My reading is quoted verbatim. You have to just use your common sense and apply it. There is an index given. You don't have to keep on just searching on the book. People, I'm telling you this because people don't apply their mind to look at the index and go to the relevant page where the judgment head note is written. I'm sharing these are the practical problems which people face. Now, each paper is of 100 marks. So total 400 marks. So in all, you need to have 240 marks in total. And for 50 marks, you must get in all the papers to pass this examination. So 250 marks, you need to have in all the papers and 240 in aggregate. So there are various criteria where if a person is not able to clear it, how he can clear that examination.
I'm coming to preparation tips and techniques. Any tip that you wish to share as an expert?
Yes, one and very important one.
Yes.
We forgot how to write. This is a physical pen and paper, right? You have to write with hand. And with typing and all, and after leaving law school 5 years back, most of us have forgotten how to write a paper. So you actually need to practice to write. You need to time yourself. Rest everything you are able to do. First, our writing is so bad that people are not able to read. Understand the examiners are in habit of reading the typed copy. They are not in a habit of reading the handwritten paper. Mostly people are not able to complete their papers because paper is so long. That is one aspect. Second aspect is our writing has become totally illegible. So you actually need to practice that. You need to have enough pen, pencil, paper. You must highlight the important points. You need to understand your examiners, though they will be checking very diligently. They are senior lawyers, designated senior advocates. And in designated senior advocates, they are, because now you are getting too many lawyers are being designated as seniors. So these are the top of the top. You can call them super seniors who usually correct, evaluate these papers. So at my time, it was P.P. Rao sir, who was, I think, the chairman. So I'm just giving you examples so that you can understand the level of people who are evaluating these papers. So writing is important. You must do this work like for practice and procedure. If you are active in court, you are doing filing, you are visiting, you know where the registry is, how it functions. You must read the Supreme Court rules from cover to cover. And it will be very helpful if you are friendly with your clerk, right? Because he is one person who understands the working of court like no one else.
So a very important pertinent point that is made by ma'am, that these are handwritten examinations. So you're supposed to write them down, and these are not examinations that you take virtually, ma'am. But to add to that, do you think that COVID era that we all are in, and in the middle of it, in fact, so the chances of this exam going virtual, do you see any chance?
See, this year exams, they have been postponed. They have been rather cancelled. They were in March. There was a notification for May. In May, there was a notification for June. And finally, they have decided to postpone for this year. And last year, in 2019, last year also, they could not conduct. In 2019, when they conducted, they made around 200 plus AORs. This is the same exam where you used to have 6 or 7 people made AORs each year. So, and earlier their exam used to happen twice a year. Now it is only an annual affair. Right. So going virtual, I have my own doubts because they want to maintain a certain level. That is what my understanding is.
Now, moving forward, ma'am, next question, when and where is the examination held, and where are the dates of this examination notified? Is it on the Supreme Court website, or is it put up on a soft board in the Supreme Court premises?
It is put on the Supreme Court premises on the soft board, but everything is available on the Supreme Court website also, right from the notification of the examination to the dates will it be where it will be conducted. These examinations are conducted in the Supreme Court premises itself in the courtrooms during summer vacation or winter vacation earlier, but now only during the summer vacation. You get like you will get your good school type feeling. You have got a chairs with the side table on it on which you write. So you are arranged in a group of 4 or 5 people, 7 or 8 people in one room. There is an invigilator there. Now, even when I said that last year 200 plus people were made AORs, but still the passing percentage was 18 or 19% only. Before that, it used to be like, if I go a decade back, it used to be 6-7%, and in the earlier days, it used to be barely 1 or 2%.
All right. Moving forward, ma'am, now we all have heard of this solicitor examination that is conducted in Maharashtra by the Bombay Incorporated Law Society. And it is always said, when I was in Bombay and I was pursuing law, I was told that the solicitor examination in Maharashtra, the moment one person, a lawyer qualifies it, he need not write the AOR exam because a solicitor de facto becomes an AOR the moment he or she qualifies the SOLS exam conducted by the Bombay Incorporated Law Society. Ma'am, to what extent is it true? If you could elaborate further.
Yeah, it is there. It is true that if you are a lawyer with Bombay Incorporated Society, you need not write AOR exam. But if you will see, like there are many solicitor England and Wales after writing QLTT paper. My husband wrote it, but now when he wrote it was called QLTT, but now it is called QLTS. So even if you are qualified in England for solicitor and you want to become AOR, you have to write AOR. But if you are qualified from Bombay Incorporated Society as a solicitor, you need not write your exam. Saying that there is no examination as rigorous as Bombay Incorporated, so the solicitor examination. It is a rigorous course. It is very difficult course, and once somebody has done that, he is actually master of law. So once, I mean, it is a very superior qualification as far as the procedural aspects of things are concerned.
So on a lighter note, if you clear the solicitor examination conducted by the Bombay Incorporated Law Society, you're sorted for life.
Yeah, definitely.
So moving forward, ma'am, your experiences as an advocate on record and the lessons that you've learned and that you wish to share with all the viewers who are watching this session.
See, as an AOR, the one incident like I would like to share, see, there is a gender role which plays, and as a women lawyer, I will definitely say that I did and I do have additional responsibility of home, of kid and all. So my husband being in practice, so I was doing a lot of drafting for home, but because our kid was young, so my priority was my child. So I was doing these cases. I was drafting, I was filing also, but I was not present in the court for all the days. Like once a week I was there when my son was small. Now he's also going to college. So this is, I'm talking about long back. So there was this matter before our Justice Singhvi, GS Singhvi sir. And in that matter, this was a matter of Nizam of Hyderabad. I was not the original advocate on record. There was some rift and they wanted to replace the AOR with another with me as their AOR. Now the normal practice is you give the NOC and another lawyer come, but court wanted to understand whether there is a genuine need by which an AOR is to be changed. So in that case, the court marked that the proposed AOR should also be present in the court. So that is how I moved from my comfort zone. I have brought to the court almost every day. So that is how I came out from my comfort zone as an AOR. Said that there is a practice of people just signing, getting it signed and everything. So we try to depreciate this practice as much as possible, but sometimes you have to do with people whom you trust, right? Because I know like if somebody from my office is drafting or filing, so sometimes you just trust them and you go ahead. Otherwise, as an AOR, it is your duty to read each and every line that is filed, because ultimately, if there is any misrepresentation, if something is wrong, that will come on you. There have been cases in the Supreme Court where, there is a translation, it goes for English translation. If the translation is not accurate, client has been slapped with the penalty of 25,000 plus rupees for wrong translation, and AOR was held responsible that as an AOR, this is your responsibility. AOR is being shaded. So even for the translation that we get it done, we have to read it at least once. Whether they have appropriately translated it or not. Said that when you get matters, because it is Supreme Court, you get matters from everywhere. So there are challenges when it is translation coming from some other places. Like if I get matter from Karnataka, I don't know Kannada, right? So there are some papers. So in that, I did ask a friend of mine who knows Kannada to just check it, because that case was very shady. So these are some responsibilities which you need to have. And sometimes clients do, as in any other case, they try to misguide you. They don't provide you with the correct copies. So as an AOR, that is your additional qualification. That is not qualification, that is your additional duty, that you should ensure that there is, that whatever you present to court is fair and square.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that elaborate response. Now, coming to the next question, AOR examinations, ma'am, during the pandemic, do you see any change in the format, or do you think that it will continue to be the same? It will continue to haunt all lawyers?
No, actually there is see, every cloud has a silver lining. So pandemic has also brought some kind of a silver lining. As far as, see, e-filing is there from past 2 decades or so. Nobody used it, right? But during pendency, I never used it. But during pendency, I did everything. We did e-filing. Initially, there were teething problem, but now we realize that it is actually very convenient mode of doing. You save lot on paper. In fact, you save lot of expenses of clients also, right? Like even for a defect, see, Supreme Court had initially started charging 1.5 rupees for each pages, and they used to have 4 copies. Now Supreme Court has later started that why should we print on a single page? There are judges who read on the screen also, but you have to take out a copy for the record. Then they started taking out on the both sides of the pages. So the cost has come down to 0.75 paisa for per page, right? These are the small changes which has come. So today, if I have to go and file one page which is defective, I don't have to take out 4 different copies, go there and file, or get my clerk, he will go work there. It can be done at the convenience of your home, of your office. So e-filing portal, and each day there is something or the other that they are trying to integrate. So otherwise, as you know, we are high inertia people as lawyer. We are status quo people. We would have never changed our way had it not been forced upon us. So even for removing of the gown, we have been harping that it is English tradition and this and that. Until and unless for pandemic, had it not been there, we would not have done away with this thing. Same thing goes for the e-filing, even for virtual hearing. As a lawyer, it has opened far more avenues for me. I can sit and I can go in the forecourt sitting on my chair. It is very convenient to do. And even for like, there was this case which is often cited. This was this young lawyer from Jaisalmer. He argued a bail application before Supreme Court. So he said, "ठीक है, mobile से कर रहा हूँ, it is fine. This is what I can afford here." Because it gives me better connectivity rather than from my Wi-Fi through anything. So I think pandemic has actually brought certain good changes.
Now, ma'am, it is said that to be eligible to take this examination, there's a mandatory training that you have to undergo with an AOR. Who was the AOR in your case?
In my case, the AOR was Mr. Sharma, Mr. P.D. Sharma, with whom we share our chamber also. So he is one of earliest, I won't say the earlier, but yeah, earliest only. His AOR number is somewhere in 300s. So he's quite old now. So he was with him that we did our training.
Great, ma'am. So any concluding remarks from your side? Thank you so much for this elaborate session, and I'm sure it will benefit all our viewers. Anything which you wish to say towards the end of the segment?
Thank you, Jeff, for having me. AOR exam is a very nice way, like if you want to have a practice in Supreme Court, there are two thoughts that goes on. One says that I want to be designated as a senior, so this AOR exam filing business is not for me. And then there is another thought of school which says that you actually need to have a full control of your practice rather than on relying on somebody else. So being an AOR actually helps. And now if you look at the trend, that amount of people which are being designated as seniors, right? You will soon have a dearth of people, because as a senior, you cannot, I mean, if you are an ideal senior, if you follow all the rules and procedure, you cannot take the brief, you cannot meet the client. So I believe that dependency on the junior advocates as well as AORs will rise more. See, like Supreme Court in the last count, it designated 37 seniors. Delhi High Court designated recently 57 seniors. Now there is not much distance between Delhi High Court and Supreme Court. So with so much pool coming, and it is not just these two places, in every High Court, after Indira Jaisingh's judgment, there is a floodgate has opened for the designation, right? So if you look purely from the commercial perspective, also from the practice, then I think being an AOR, because you cannot control, see, either you give up your that I am actually a senior, I don't meet client, I don't take my brief. If you follow the rich tradition of being designated as a senior, then it is a different thing. If you don't follow, then it is a different thing. But strictly speaking, you will require an AOR if you want to practice in Supreme Court. There are, like you asked me for an example of this thing. See, I have been filing a lot of writ petitions during pandemic regarding these entrance exams. So last year there was somebody else for whom we have filed, but there was some medical issue at my place, so I could not file. So this person got it filed through somebody else who was just a name lending AOR, and they could not even get it listed for almost 2 months. And eventually the client had to suffer, and Supreme Court sent us back to Delhi High Court. By the time, so you need to have name lending AORs won't do. You need to have people who will get the cases listed, who will be there if court comes for any direction, if court comes for chiding the or scolding the lawyers, then an AOR should be there to take the burn. Likewise, even if you are a senior, the court will pass direction only to the AOR, because AOR is the one who is responsible to the court.
So thank you so much, ma'am. So to all the viewers who were watching, we never had a mentor in law school, unfortunately, but you are fortunate because we have so many of them on the virtual amicus. A big thank you to Dr. Charu Mathur, ma'am, for taking out time on a Saturday afternoon and for doing this brilliant Q&A session on how to crack the Supreme Court Advocate on Record examination. It is undoubtedly one of the most important segments that we've covered so far, because every lawyer practicing in any part of the country definitely thinks about cracking or writing the AOR examination once in his lifetime as a legal practitioner. So this segment will definitely and immensely benefit all the viewers, young lawyers, law students who are watching, as to how to approach an AOR exam, the preparation tips, the techniques coming from the expert, Dr. Mathur herself, and how to crack and this examination called the Advocate on Record examination. So thank you so much, ma'am, once again, and we hope to see you again.
Thank you for having me. Right, take care.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Wow, it's goodbye for now. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.